Creativity, imagination, and the need to think differently are shaping the future of healthcare as much as data, AI, and digital health technologies. I'm Drew Beck, Head of Strategy, Growth, and Innovation for Syneos Health Learning Solutions, and I'll be your host for this special series of the Syneos Health Podcast. We're inviting you to explore how the bold themes from our most recent Health Trends report are taking shape through industry collaboration and driving meaningful impact for patients. Welcome to the Syneos Health Podcast, 2025 Health Trends. Today we're talking AI and R&D with Katya Maganova and Vic Chawla, two of our managing directors in consulting, and Brian Carver, our executive director of therapeutic strategy and innovation for our rare disease consortium. AI is poised to play an outsized role in rare disease drug development and diagnosis and treatment at a time when unmet needs remain vast. And let's face it, time is precious for the patients and families who are waiting for these new therapies. That's why I've brought these experts from across Syneos together today to talk about how AI can play a really promising role across that. So I'm going to give each of these experts a chance to introduce themselves and throw one little extra icebreaker. Tell us something that you've read, heard, or learned about AI in the last few weeks that surprised or delighted you. Katya, how about you first?
I'm Katya Maganova. I'm a managing director, as Drew mentioned, in the commercial advisory group at Syneos Health Consulting. I've been here for 10 years, and a lot of things have changed in our industry, and a lot of things have stayed the same. But AI has taken a very prominent role in a lot of our discussions, how we do work, how our clients do their jobs, probably in the last 2 or 3 years. So one fun fact that I learned recently doesn't actually have to do with life science, but I thought it was interesting. So we learned a lot about AI-generated artwork. And what I thought was interesting is that the first AI-generated artwork that sold at an auction sold for over $400,000. So AI is making money on some of the artwork that it's creating. I just thought that was interesting and really just speaks to how AI is taking over all parts of our lives, not just our daily job.
Great call out. Brian, how about over to you before we go to Vic?
Sure. Brian Carver, Executive Director and Strat Lead, and have been working in the space now for more than a decade, and really exciting to see AI ML's growth, just what we're bringing to not just healthcare, but also sites and patients. I think one item that's really fascinating as we've seen the space evolve is just the investment that we're seeing across healthcare, clinical research, and drug development, with somewhere around $6 billion or so investment between 2020 to 2023. Forecasting now is over $200 billion by 2030. So again, just really seeing the space grow and see how we can do things smarter, better, faster, and for our patients, safer and more effective. I don't know that I'm always ready for the development and growth in that space, but it's coming and we all better be prepared and see how we can harness its power.
Brian, so well said. Vic, how about you to wrap us up?
Vic Chawla here. I'm a managing director with Syneos Commercial Advisory Group. Been in life sciences consulting for about 15 years and support biopharma health tech companies with investments, especially in AI. More and more of the requests that we are seeing with our clients always related to an AI angle or how they can use AI to make better, faster, cheaper decisions. One interesting fact that I've learned recently about AI is the recent presentation by NVIDIA CEO this week, or I believe last week, where he sort of highlighted that AI robots or agents are poised to become the new digital workforce. And I see the role for robots and other support agents in hospitals and other medical settings. Obviously, it's very scary, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for medical workforce and issues that they face today.
Instead of a fun fact, I'll share just an anecdote that came out of a Harvard AI expert recently. And he contextualized AI as saying essentially what it's doing is it's lowering the cost of cognition. When I let that really rest on me, I think about historically how we as an industry, the life science industry, we've thought about cognition both in terms of genius, essentially, right? Like when we think about R&D, like you're looking for that aha moment, the breakthrough that comes often from brilliant scientific minds. But then you're also looking for commercial leadership. You look to tenured, experienced, well-compensated players in the space to give you guidance. And I think that in our space, it's true too. As AI becomes more and more prevalent for even mid-level leaders, hopefully they're able to make the kind of informed decisions, both on the clinical side and on the commercial side, that historically would have taken far more tenure and far more education to make those same accurate calls. And I think that that's, to me, an exciting time to be thinking about some of those investments that Brian was talking about really starting to come to fruition. To get our conversation started, let's start with the rare disease research and development perspective. Our trends report talked about how efforts to harness the power of AI and machine learning to accelerate rare disease drug development have already been demonstrating some significant potential and promise. Brian, will you talk to us a little bit more about that? Maybe some topics that came from the trends report and other stuff just from your experience recently.
Of course, yeah. And thanks so much for raising that important question. And with my current role, especially as a rare disease strat lead and working on the consortium, I meet with customers all the time to think about how we can help identify patients, support patients, just understanding there's more than 7,000 known confirmed rare diseases, and only about 4 or 5% of those actually come with some level of treatment. So there are many areas of focus impacting patients, families, caregivers, and 40 to 50% of those are pediatric in nature. So the community really needs our help and support, and AI/ML really plays a big part. A couple examples that really jump to mind for me of thinking how we could better identify patients, either from a diagnosis standpoint or for clinical trials. UCLA had ran a really dedicated program harnessing the power of AI/ML, looking at EMR. So really wanting to look and see what are the patients in their database for this rare immunodeficiency program? What are some existing genomic data and lab data to really better find and target those patients? And it was really exciting to see them make that initial level investment to help identify patients, and really fascinating performance where they were able to really look and see of the patients that the system had identified, greater than 75% were actually eligible for clinical trial. So again, trying to do things smarter, differently, and faster is really important. And we've seen this in other spaces as well. I had just left a World Symposium conference for lysosomal storage disorders, and seeing the focus from Cambridge as well as University of Minnesota to really harness the power of radiomics as well and better diagnose ILD, other impact and conditions from these progressive disorders. So really wanting to see what can we do to better identify potential patients, and then even thinking a little bit more on the undiagnosed side as well when you're entering ultra rare. How can you harness the power of genomic databases? What do you have from earlier genetic testing? And then being able to really lean on the machine learning part of tying it all together with biomarkers, EMR, and imaging. So again, it's not just conceptual. These things are happening and being deployed, and it's helping the community as well as clinical trial development as well.
Thanks, Brian. Great points here. Katja, Vic, any other comments or additions to anything Brian shared?
I think all of the innovation happening on the clinical side in patient identification is so relevant on the commercial side as well. And one really cool thing about AI is that it's maybe bringing the clinical and the commercial side closer together, because a lot of the technology that's being deployed is relevant in both settings. Just to tie on to what Brian was saying, two things I've seen and been thinking about from a patient targeting perspective. One is a cool tool that I've seen some of our clients start to use to explore, as well as the physicians, is looking at healthcare data, EHR data for specific patient populations, and try to uncover what are some of the events that correlate to a diagnosis, to a progression of disease, and really leveraging that to be able to get to those patients faster, especially in rare disease, especially in patients that may not have consistent visits. That's a really powerful tool, a really powerful set of information to help get patients treatment earlier. On the equally important side, once you do spend all the money and time and investing in developing a drug, well, now it's in the commercial landscape. And now we're thinking about, how do physicians get access to this therapy? How can physicians identify these patients? How can the pharmaceutical and biotech companies get the right information to the right physician at the right time? So AI is really powerful in looking at a lot of data. And in small rare disease companies, they don't have a large sales force to go and knock on every door. So leveraging the AI tools and digital tools to almost predict where the next patient might show up, predict who the next physician might be that would need this information to make the right treatment decision. That's really powerful for companies that are looking to commercialize and bring that product to a broader set of patients.
It's a great point, Katja. And I think the more I've sat with this trend, the more I'm seeing AI almost be like a synthetic microscope for rare disease that brings what otherwise was too small for us to see at a visible degree in the way that we could see larger chronic illnesses or other diseases historically that life science organizations have been focused on. They had enough detail that we could see some of those nuances. And instead, AI, in a world where it's very difficult for organizations to see that level of granularity, AI in some ways is acting as our microscope. So we can look at the potential behavior under the lens and start to calibrate some of those things. Let's move on to the next topic. Let's think through the investor's lens. As we look at R&D for several years, rare disease has become a hotter and hotter space. It's become in more demand as we move in the post-blockbuster era. Much of that's being filled up in rare disease. Vic, would you talk to us a little bit about how you're seeing AI play in that space around rare disease and investors?
Based on some of the trends we are seeing in the market and the types of requests we are getting from our clients, not just in the biotech space, but also devices, medical imaging, there's a lot of AI investments that's going into every segment of the drug development value chain. So drug discovery to patient identification, imaging, devices, patient adherence, etc. One challenge we are seeing is the market is getting so crowded so fast. How do you identify what is good versus something which is more commoditized? And that's where the art of performing a good diligence on some of these new concepts, new technologies come in. We recently conducted a survey, which is Syneos's annual survey that we conduct every year with BD executives, both on the buy side and sell side, to understand where they are investing and what trends they are seeing in terms of the investment landscape. One of the very interesting findings from that survey was, obviously it varies based on the size of the company, therapeutic area, etc. But clients are really looking at developing their own AI capabilities in-house to improve productivity, margins, etc. And areas where the technology is too novel, too emerging, too rapidly evolving, they are looking at these startups, smaller companies, AI-based companies, to use them on a subscription model. It really depends on what the offering is and what the size of the company and what their internal priorities might be.
A trend I've been seeing emerge over the last few years is some of our large pharma clients are approaching R&D through a slightly different lens and how they look at their investment. Historically, it's been in the assets themselves. And I feel like there's been a bit of a sea change to where many of them are seeing the investment in AI as part of the R&D budget spend. They think about how to reallocate some of those funds so then it can increase almost as an amplifier, like a turbocharger. I'm the son of a mechanic. So an engine can work without a turbocharger, but it's that much more powerful with it. A turbocharger can't work without an engine. And so the idea of if we latch these two things together, a promising molecular pipeline, but then adding on AI as an investment to get greater gains out of it, I think is there. Kasia, we got to talk about that a little bit in the lead up into this. So do you mind taking it home with far more aplomb?
Yeah, the paper that Vic referenced, there is one nuance in there. So a lot of interest in investment in machine learning and AI, but specifically when we just look at large cap companies, so these large pharma that are really thinking about where to put their money, 43% of deal makers said they are actively seeking to invest in-house to grow those capabilities organically, not just partner out their AI capabilities, but really have their own asset in the future to drive forward innovation.
And Kasia, in some of the things I've heard in my conversations with executives, this idea, when we look at exactly where we are in this moment in time in this industry, many of those large pharma players have lived through the blockbuster era, most if not all of them. And when you think about what to do as you come to the end of an era where there was tremendous investment in R&D and some of those assets that did in fact provide the fuel for the next generation, I think they're thinking of new ways to put that investment to work. And AI is becoming very much one of those.
Just one other comment I would like to make here is, given the macroeconomic conditions that we are seeing, a lot of, especially big pharma companies, their priorities for this year has slightly shifted, not just innovation, but also towards R&D productivity, improving margins, improving cost structures. And AI is playing a very important role, a very critical role in not just innovation for those companies, but also in terms of realizing cost savings through R&D productivity or different cost structuring.
Back to those Harvard researchers I talked about, they're experts in AI. They put forth this concept called the AI first company. And one of the topics that I found so interesting, it was across all industries, but when they chose their SMEs, multiple actually were from life science industry. Based on our market size compared to other industries, we were overrepresented in this. And one of the points they made is that some organizations have been born in this AI era and are actually being built out as AI first companies. And one of those that they chose to feature was actually talking about Moderna. When you think about what we lived through in terms of a global pandemic, and in many organizations, they were already built to be successful in the blockbuster era and now are adopting AI to give them efficiencies. There are some organizations that were born AI first, designed to actually build the entire infrastructure around this new emerging technology in a new way. And so far, at least Moderna is a quite promising story. They were able to bring a vaccine for COVID to market markedly faster than anything historically. And it was leveraging AI in a way that was quite pioneering. Any other perspective to add on to that one? Is it something that you've seen any other organizations use, or have you gotten to see it secondhand?
One thing I'll highlight, Drew, when we presented this paper, we also spoke with a number of panelists, and we asked, from their opinion, what is the role of AI? Yes, it's making us more efficient, but is it going to replace the workforce? Is this going to be the only R&D? So a little different. This brings us back to Vic's fun fact from the beginning. We're not seeing robots join us in the R&D rooms quite yet in pharma. It is creating a lot of efficiencies, as Vic brought up, but there still has to be a bigger proof of concept, if you will, on that validated use case to completely replace a current practice in the R&D to really get us to an AI-only drug or vaccine or whatever that is. So the Moderna example is great because they used AI to make themselves a lot more efficient, but there is still a head of R&D, a translational scientist. So all those roles are critical, and they just have to think differently and almost embrace this new era to get ahead of other companies, because soon enough, everyone else will catch up as well.
Beautifully said, Katja. And I think that that's the nuance, that it's not AI only. It's some organizations are moving towards an AI first approach, intending to integrate artificial intelligence into many of their processes in a way that allows the human not only oversight, but direction to be that much more impactful. Let's bring it back to rare disease. Let's think of it specifically through the lens of an organization sitting atop a promising R&D portfolio in rare disease. Brian, will you talk to us a little bit about how AI can be a part of bringing that all to bear in new ways?
Yeah, of course. And I got a couple examples I'd love to talk to. And, it's interesting as we were preparing for the discussion and thinking about the impact of AI, ML and capacities. I think back to the book, again, science fiction, which is interesting. Now we're in a fiction environment, but with I Am Legend, where Will Smith eventually played the former U.S. Army virologist and was working to help stop the apocalypse, right? And you're thinking of his own lab and the use of computers and technology and really to help find what was going to help save the world. And we're now seeing companies and real drugs come to market, specifically looking at the investment that Virgin made and originally a proof of concept type program and being able to support an ALS product, leveraging an AI enabled platform to really get to that initial phase 1 proof of concept program. So the dynamic of making investment and then really leveraging AI to look at specific assets in drug development. A novel concept, reading a book 20 years ago that was built out, but again, that those items are really coming to life and making its way to patients. But again, using it in a way that is looking at safety, efficacy, really trying to help address that 95% of rare diseases with unmet therapies and being able to do so in a way that could help accelerate and reduce the time that's in lab. And I think one other item that was really interesting to see and learn more about, again, back to Sanofi in some sense in rare disease and what they presented at Worlds and the commitment that they've made within AI has been really interesting to see them present the virtual patient dynamic and something they had coined twinning, which was interesting to see. And again, looking at AI ML in a way that you could look at real data, both clinical from EMR, lab data, look at how they could predict patients to progress with specific assets. So again, novel technologies that are being developed, built, and practiced in real world R&D, which again is really exciting to see.
That is exciting. I think about all the comments that have been shared here. In summary, I hear us saying AI is here. It's here and it's probably here to stay, and it's making impacts. At the same time, as an industry, we're still figuring out how we move to a place where it is the driving force. It is being used in pilots. It's seeing certain spots where it's been particularly promising. But I think when we look across the industry, back to the Dealmakers report that Katya and Vic walked us through, there's still some ways to go in it driving the kind of holistic transformation in the life science industry that changes the way that we identify, develop, and deploy assets at scale. Any final comments from each of you? Brian, you're top of my screen, so I'll give you the chance to give your concluding remarks.
Yeah, of course. We've talked a lot here about what's happening within industry and company investments. As someone who touches a lot of opportunities, is responsible for early engagement, protocol planning, development. Within Syneos Health, it's exciting to see as well some of the investments we've made and how we're able to leverage AI as well with predictive modeling for recruitment and enrollment, how we can reduce site and patient burden with protocol development. There's a lot of really unique tools as well at our fingertips to bring together the marriage of what's happening with clinical and commercial. So really exciting time to be in drug development.
Vic, how about you?
From my standpoint, I also work quite a bit with our investor community. So as more and more funding goes into AI space, I feel it'll be important for investors to think about potential risks, data privacy issues, other red flags that are associated with AI investments. As the market becomes more and more commoditized, it'll be very important for them to fully understand what is a real opportunity and a quality investment versus a more commoditized landscape. Obviously, very exciting. Next 1 to 3 years are going to be a lot of activity, a lot of action, a lot of investments in this market. And we expect to continue to see more and more investments in this space.
Katya, how about you to bring us home?
Just to add to what Vic is saying, not only from the investor community, but I think everyone, including our team at Syneos, our clients, the investors, there's a lot of noise, a lot of things going on in the industry. I think starting to focus in on how you want to use AI, how it will help, and start to focusing efforts will be important. And right now there's a little bit of a race of who can do it better. So I think in the next few years, we'll get a better sense of what some companies that are going to be maybe a little bit further along, have some proven use cases and might be preferred. But I think there's just always going to be innovation in the space. So really important to educate yourself on the role of AI and really understand what your goals are with the AI tools and the machine learning tools that you invest in and that you decide to use as part of your commercialization, your clinical plans, and whatever else companies are doing to progress their pipeline assets.
Beautifully said. I want to add one last thing as the host. My ask of anyone listening to this is to remember that while we've talked about some very specific AI topics and applications in rare disease, wherever you sit in the life science industry, there is application for AI, and there's compliant application for AI at this point in 2025. My ask is for you to do the practice it takes to understand and use it yourself. Whatever you're doing in the world, if you can find the compliant way to use it, find where it's being effective today. Find where the AI tools can help you be more scalable, find greater insights and be more strategic. Get that type of collaboration historically you would have only gotten by bouncing ideas off multiple other humans. Find a way to glean value in your role, and that's going to help you do exactly what Kavya was getting at. Help you figure out where can we apply it best? What are the bigger things that we could solve with those types of tools? Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate you listening in. That's all for today's episode of the Syneos Health Podcast. I'm your host, Drew Beck. If you have other topical issues you'd like to hear on this podcast, please send us a message at podcast@syneoshealth.com. And for access to more future-focused, actionable life science insights, please visit the Syneos Health Insights Hub at insightshub.health. Syneos Health, shortening the distance from lab to life.